Hi everyone, thanks for joining us tonight. My name's Alyssa Dole and I'm a member of the MBA Tour. We host conferences around the world to help connect business school with prospective candidates. We just kind of finished up our summer fall tours, so thanks to everyone who came out. And we also recently announced our upcoming winter events, so be sure to go to our website after this and check out our upcoming tours. Today, I'm joined by Scott Edinburgh, who is founder and CEO of Personal MBA Coach, an organization that helps candidates from around the world get into top MBA programs. He's been a guest speaker at many of our events, so you very well may have seen him present before in person, and you also may see him in the future. So today he's going to be sharing tips on how to write winning essays. So I'm going to let him take it from here. Thanks so much, Scott.
Alyssa, as always, thank you so much. Really appreciate the invite and having me here tonight, this morning, this afternoon, wherever you're all living. So great. Well, everyone, look, we'll talk about how to write winning MBA essays. Some of you might have done these webinars before. In case you haven't, there's a little question feature in the app where you can just type questions. It'll take me a minute to scroll through. The box is sort of small to be able to click the arrows, but in any case, I will monitor the questions throughout the night, and feel free to ask questions, and we'll be kind of stopping along the way to answer them. Everyone's in listen-only mute mode, so you can't talk, but you can type the questions. I'll read them out loud and then answer them for folks. So a little bit of background about myself for those of you who I do not have the pleasure of knowing. I went to MIT for undergrad. As part of their business program, I took a lot of MBA classes. So I studied at Sloan, was the teaching assistant for one of the MBA courses on negotiations, and then I began working at Deloitte in consulting, did strategy and operations, mergers and acquisitions work for 3 years, and then went to Wharton for my MBA at age 25. I chose Wharton for 2 reasons. One, when I was in high school, I took a lot of classes during the summer at Wharton for 2 summers and liked the classes. Plus, I wanted to go into real estate development, so picked Wharton to study real estate. Loved the program, and I actually founded Personal MBA Coach while I was a student at Wharton. My friend was applying to schools. He hired another firm that had a bit more of a standard process. I can go into more details offline. Long story short, I redid his materials with him. He got into Harvard, helped another friend get to Harvard, and expanded from there. We're now been in the business for 12 years, have different rankings on some different sites that you may or may not have seen, and 96% of our clients are successful. A little bit about what we do, and then after the slide, we'll go on to actual content for you. So as an admissions consultancy, we offer complete services from early planning. So you're not applying now, you're planning ahead for the future and want to know how to improve your profile. What are things you can be doing to perfect yourself between now and when you actually are applying, through GMAT tutoring. We have 11 tutors on our team who tutor for the GMAT, and it's very personalized tutoring. We have in-house software that we use to guide through tutoring sessions, modules, practice questions. Everything is all customized, and we use whiteboard sharing platforms, video, Skype. I'm on the board of directors of AGAC, the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants, which is a group of 7 board members globally that work pretty closely with AdCom throughout the year. We have a conference every summer with admissions directors where I give a presentation to them, not this one, and tell them the results of the survey we do, help them to improve their recruiting and yield. And then we do this mock applicant evaluation session where I sit in a room with admissions directors, analyze applications, I'll fake and determine who should, quote, get accepted. We have a team of now 14 former MBA interviewers to help with interview prep and clients to network with at every top school. So that's a little bit of background about myself. Those of you who just joined, we can kind of go over that at the end. See, there's already a question, so let's see. I have a tutor but would like guidance. Otherwise, I'm also taking the GRE. Yes, so we tutor for all exams. So it can definitely help you. Let's see, would I be able to sign up? Absolutely, yeah. So feel free to send me an email. It's Scott, SCOTT, personalmbacoach.com, and we can chat about that later offline. Great question. So essay writing is a multi-step process. We put this up here because everyone starts at a different point in time, and it's kind of fun to run a business like this. Some people start early, some people start in the middle, others want to start late, and we say no, there's sort of not enough time. But essay writing really is a multi-step process where start with brainstorming. What are you about? What are you writing? So one of the first things that we do with clients is do a brainstorming session. And for those of you just joining, I'll go over details about myself in a bit. I'm Scott with Personal MBA Coach. We'll be talking about essays today. So brainstorming, right? We have a sense for what are the key points we want to highlight about applicants. They fill out this form that tells us their passions, hobbies, challenges, struggles, things like that. And then we talk through the stories, what goes in the resume, what should go in the essays, what do we want recommenders to talk through. It's all brainstorming, right? What are the key messages? The same process happens with an essay. Outlining. Outlining is really important. We don't require it of applicants, but we definitely suggest it, where before writing a full essay, you sit down and you might have to write 500 words, staring at a blank screen. It's very daunting. What are you writing? How are you starting? Just outline it. Think about what are a few key points that you want to be highlighting throughout the essays, and then break it down into section. As you'll do that, you might see that you have to redo your outline. For instance, sometimes we see people write essays about goals, and they write 50% of the essay about the past. And admissions directors just don't want to hear that. They have questions for a reason. So if you outline it and you see what words you're writing and how many for each section, it kind of helps you to think through whether your outline is good. Obviously, draft, editing again and again. Ideally, every 2 days you're editing essays. And that's the quick turnaround time that we do with clients as well. The reason 2 days is nice because if you take too long, say you wait 4 to 5 days in between versions, you end up getting stale and you forget some of the content. It sits too long. Conversely, I had one client who I love, and she actually helps us give talks and presentations with the MBA Tour. She would return essays back within 2 to 3 hours. At one point I said, take some time, think about it, right? Reflect, sleep on it. So ideally every 2 days is a nice, kind of time period. And then proofreading. We have 2 professional proofreaders that go through everything and make sure that things are proofed. If you're doing things on your own, make sure to have someone else read the essays. So that's kind of basic. You haven't learned anything yet. But some general principles, right? Answer the question asked. This is very important. It's one of my pitfalls for those of you who saw my top pitfalls presentation at the MBA Tours, right? Answer the question that's actually asked. Sometimes there's a tendency to, I'll call it over answer, right? I have this whole plan. I've been thinking, I've been going to the MBA Tour and other events and talking with admissions directors. I have my whole spiel, right? I know why I want to go to school, what I want to get out of the program, why now is the right time. And so when I'm asked a question about how I want to develop as a leader at a school, I'm going to launch into my whole spiel because this is the chance for me to tell them my entire story. And as part of that, I'll talk about a leader. No, absolutely wrong. If you ask a question about being a leader, talk about being a leader. Don't write a whole lot about your goals. Don't mention what you've done in the past unless it's really related to leadership. So really pay attention to the question asked. If the school doesn't ask about goals, it's because they don't care. At least they don't care as part of the applications anyway. Next, write authentically. What I mean by this is don't feel like you have to write things that sound good. This is not Pulitzer Prize winning writing. I've been doing this for over 12 years and our success rate is the highest of anyone out there. I've never won any writing prize, right? You just really need to write strong and write impactful, but these are not award-winning essays. These are essays that are clear, that are concise, and get the point across. Of course, things should fit with your personal story, whatever that is. Make sure not to repeat yourself too much. I'm breaking a rule. I don't like to read slides, so apologies, but it's easier in person to just kind of talk to folks than on a webinar. Don't repeat yourself because you only have so many things that you can cover in an application. And if you spend 2 different sections talking about the same thing, then you're not really taking advantage of things. Obviously, be succinct. Short sentences are good, 20 to 30 words. If you're writing a 40-word sentences, odds are it's a run-on sentence and the reader is not too interested in it. Keep your language approachable. We don't need fancy words. This is just basic writing. And pick interesting topics where possible. If they are unique, that's great. See if we have any questions so far. Answer the first question. And is the webinar being recorded, and can you have a recording later? Yes, it is being recorded, and you can have the recording later. We will be emailing it out to you, actually. Okay, so most common essay categories: personal story essay, goals, and why MBA. We will only talk about some topics today, but here's an example. So Harvard Business School. As we review your application, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy for the Harvard Business School MBA program? Very open-ended, right? They're giving you no direction. You can write anything that you want. Stanford, what is most important to you and why? This is the personal story, right? You have the freedom to write what you want. And as you think about these, think through what makes you unique. What drives you? You wake up in the morning and you go to work, presumably, or maybe you stay home. Why are you doing that? What are your passions? What actually makes you unique from peers? And think through the choices in your life that have shaped you. Chicago Booth asks this year and last year as well, what are the reasons why you've made different decisions along the way? And it's kind of a really smart question. It forces you to think back and determine what drove you to do the things that you do. Now, to be clear, you do not have to give your entire life story to Harvard and tell them this, or whatever school you're applying to. If they say, write your personal story or what brings you here today, you don't have to give them everything, but you do have to think through why you made the decisions along the way. So everyone does have a unique story. Many clients struggle with this, and at first I struggled a little bit, but then I got to some really cool kind of takeaways, which I can tell you later. But everyone does have a story. Some are obviously stronger than others. This is an example of two different folks. So Jenny and Michael. And apologies if some of you have seen me present this before. Right? Read through this for a minute and think about who has a better story. Feel free to vote if you want in the question section, or not. But I'll go through and give you the answer in a minute. So in this case, Michael has a better story. The reason Michael's story is better because the things really connect to each other. We have clients that are in tech. We're looking to go into product management, real product management expertise, and run PM at a technology firm eventually. We compete in swimming, and we're teaching underprivileged kids how to swim. So we really have two key stories. It's not that it has to go together. Everything doesn't. Yeah, everyone has gotten it right so far. I'm looking through the voting. Everyone has voted for Michael. Yeah, so it's not necessarily the fact that everything has to connect together, but it is important for there to be some kind of consistency and continuity. For those of you, I see a lot of people are joining the webinar. My name is Scott. I'm the founder of Personal MBA Coach. We're a boutique admissions consulting and tutoring firm, and we're talking about how to write essays. I'll give you more of an overview of myself at the end, so definitely stick to it. I had a question. How do we vote? So you actually just vote in the question and answer section. But I, kind of already gave you the answer here. Whereas Jenny, things don't really connect. We're interested in music. We do this junior achievement startup. I'm working across a lot of different clients. I might want to do tech later, and then I might, start a company. So things aren't necessarily connected, quite as well. You can absolutely poke holes in this, but this is just kind of an exercise. What are some personal story errors, right? What do you want to not do? First of all, give too much detail. If you need a magnifying glass to read through all the detail and figure out what you're actually trying to say, that's too much. It's important to think through what is too much detail. So I'll give you an example. If you're writing an essay and you talk about 6 different groups of people that you worked with in 5 different conversations and how you got to 3 different results, I'm totally confused and lost. Keep it simple. Even if you have to, let's say, summarize, minimize the story, keep it simple so that it's very easy to follow. As these applications are read, one sort of tip is admissions directors often spend 10 to 30 minutes reading an application. It's not that long. They're not spending 2 hours reading every detail and taking notes, thinking about it, getting a coffee, coming back. It's often very quick because there are a lot of applications to go through. So you want a story that's really easy to comprehend. Next is something that's illogical, right? If the story just doesn't make sense, if I don't understand why you're going from step 1 to step 2 and how business school is needed to get there, that might be illogical. To be clear, this does not mean that you can't change your goal or change the plan, but there needs to be some kind of logical connection. The next, and this is probably the most common that I see, is too vague, right? Be specific. I don't care if you change your mind. I didn't write that I wanted to start an admissions consultancy and tutoring company when I was applying to schools, but here I am today. Make sure to not be vague. Have a stance, take a stance, and be very, very specific along the way. And last is just having no theme, right? So if I'm hearing a whole bunch of different things that you've done, you're throwing out, everything but the kitchen sink, that might not really move the needle too much. We do need some kind of theme to tie things together, even if it feels somewhat artificial. Let's see, any questions? Any questions on personal stories? I see some questions here. So first one is, do I have any tips for someone with a liberal arts degree who has only taken a few business classes? Yeah, we have a lot of folks with liberal arts degrees. You definitely do not need to study business before applying to schools. I know when I gave my overview, I went to MIT for undergrad, Wharton for the MBA, and I studied business in both undergrad and business school, but you don't need to. And in fact, it was probably a little overkill for me. So if you have a humanities background in liberal arts, the tips I would have, it depends what you've done in the workforce, what your quant score is, but think about why you want the MBA, what you want to do with that, but also think through how you've been challenged from an analytical standpoint. Whenever we work with folks, and roughly half of our clients are domestic, half are international, and some people are coming from consulting and banking, and some are just from nonprofits and startups. A lot of different things. I always say, look, taking stock, what is it that makes you interesting, and why should I care to read your application? And if I have to think about that, and you're paying us, it's important to think through those arguments to make sure that someone who's evaluating you, is really interested. Okay, I think that's the only question right now. Wait, let me see, hold on. Sorry, the scrolling feature is not very good here, which happens every time. Go to webinar. I believe that's it. Okay. Perfect. So some common why MBA or goals essays. Booth asks, how will Booth MBA help you achieve your immediate and long-term post-MBA career goals? Columbia is, what are your career goals over the next 3 to 5 years, and what in your imagination is your long-term dream job? And Wharton asks, what do you want to gain professionally from the Wharton MBA? So if you're applying to these 3 schools, you will not write the same essay for all of them. Even though they sound similar, there are nuanced differences here, and we'll go over some of this in a bit of detail. So is a specific question here. Let's see if it's relevant. I'm a corporate lawyer who moved to a business development role at a fintech startup, and I now plan to go to business school. Is my trajectory too vague? I wouldn't use the word vague. I would say that it's important to explain the reasons why you've done these things along the way. We have lawyers that we work with every year, and I generally see them do pretty well. But it's important to talk about the transitions. Why have you made these decisions along the way? What is business school actually going to do for you? I wouldn't say that's too vague, nor would I say there's any problem with that. But there is definitely the onus on you to explain the decisions. So goals should be specific and ownable. Right? It's like what I mentioned before. You want to be able to defend this. You don't want to walk in there and say, well, I'd like to do A or B, and I'm going to study these classes and figure out whether maybe I want to do C. That'll just show that you haven't really done your homework. So have them be specific, have them be ownable. Consider both short-term and long-term goals. Every month I see an essay from someone that doesn't actually give 2 sets of goals. We want 2 goals, right? One is one right after school, 1 set of goals. And then the other one, generally 7 to 10 years out, right? What's this longer-term plan? In reality, life does not work that way. You might do one thing for 50 years or do 5 things in 5 years, and that's fine. But you do want to be specific here. Okay. Discuss the skills you'll gain at school and how you'll apply them. Now, everyone writes about classes that they'll take because that's just part of, these essays. You write about what classes, but not everyone really, really clearly connects the classes to the skills they'll learn, to the specific things they want to do on the job. And that's where you can succeed. I see a big difference between, essays that are successful and those that are not. Often the level of specificity is important here. Is this specific enough? Transition career to a new field that focuses on finance and sustainability. I think depending on what you've done previously, that would be specific enough. But we want to have, the role. So like the specific title and the specific company or, type of company. When you talk about having continuity, is it appealing to these Ivy schools having a BS and MS in finance, or is it better to change the graduate degree? It's an interesting question. I'll put it this way. If you have a master's degree, especially if it's in business-related field, it does not help you to get accepted to an MBA. But that said, it doesn't really hurt you either. It's kind of a net neutral. We have folks that get a specialized master's in business or finance. And really the question then is, well, why do you need the MBA? Usually we focus on leadership or, something else. A master's in finance will teach you a lot more than an MBA about finance. And we help folks get master's degrees as well. But the MBA will teach you a lot more about a lot of different things. It's just not quite as specific in that field. Okay, so these are some essay deep dives. Right, we talked about before, as we review your application, what more do you want us to know? So what things could be good to include in the HBS essays? Our first client is interviewing the HBS tomorrow, so wish her luck. We're just emailing about that earlier today. So what are some things that you can include? An interest or a passion, maybe an issue that you've overcome, some hobby that turned into a career, right? And any of these things could be interesting. You can write about a lot of different things. I heard one person wrote about chocolate once. It was not one of our clients. You can write about goals, things that you've done in the past, leadership. You don't have to write about HBS. If you want to, you can, but you don't have to. And make sure to not throw everything in here. This isn't tell me everything about you, nor is it just give me one key thing that I won't see anywhere else. There's so many different ways to do these essays. Last year we probably had 11 different topics and type of topics that were successful. So there's not one key way to do this. Usually you're looking at 800 to 1,000 words. We've seen 500, 600 word essays get accepted, and obviously 1,200 word essays get rejected. So it doesn't necessarily mean that more is more here. So these are some things that didn't quite work in a personal story essay. I'll let you read through this for a minute, but basically what didn't work about this is that this person tried to do too many different things at once. This feels like we're talking about school and life, curious and adventurous, helping the community, fellow classmates, balance multiple team priorities, problem solve and communicate. I'm sort of lost, and it's only one paragraph. So we want to make sure to be clear and cover a lot of things, but not be, not throw everything in here too much. Okay, I saw some questions. Let me switch to those. Do you ever need to assume as an applicant that you are disadvantaged, i.e. you are younger, only have 2 years of work experience, etc.? And if so, is this essay the place to recognize it? Worry about being perceived as too inexperienced from a work experience standpoint? I don't think so, and here's why. They know how many years of experience you have. If you have 2 years, you have 2 years. If you write about it, you're just calling further attention to it. I would instead focus on what you've done in those 2 years. So rather than explaining why you're applying when you're so young, instead just say what it is that you've done to show that you've had success. And at the end of the day, I want your essay to be just as strong as someone else who has 5 years of experience. If it is, right, meaning if I can tell them enough things about you that make you successful, they might not care that you've only had 2 years of experience. Conversely, you could have 6 years of experience and look terrible because you haven't really done that much. So focus more on what you've done than on the actual number of years. And that's the way that young people get accepted. And we have young folks getting in every year. For Booth, there's no word limit. What personal limit do you recommend shooting for? So we usually say around 500 words. And in conversations with admissions folks, that's pretty much what we hear that works out as well. So around 500 words is good for the Booth essays, 400 to 500. Wharton, what do you want to gain professionally from the Wharton MBA? And describe an impactful experience or accomplishment not reflected elsewhere in your application. How will you use what you learned through that experience to contribute to the Wharton community? So the first one, right, this is a goals essay. Establish some career context. Tell them about what you've done so far in the career and where you are, today. For those of you just joining, we're going over some essays. I see the numbers keep climbing. People are joining. You've missed some of the beginning part, but don't worry. We'll go over myself and what I do here with Personal MBA Coach at the end, and we'll send you out the deck afterwards. If you signed up, which I'm sure you did because you're here, you'll get the deck afterwards emailed to you, and there'll be a link to the recording as well. So Wharton essay, right? Some career context at the beginning. Make sure to discuss both short-term and long-term goals, and talk about Wharton. I mean, this is somewhat of a straightforward essay, but mention classes, clubs, extracurricular activities, things that you want to do on campus in order to succeed. What makes a good Wharton essay is the right level of detail. And we go into more detail with clients as we help them think through these essays, but make sure to have the right level of detail. And that's important. It shouldn't be too detailed and it shouldn't be too high level. This is like what I've done, what I want to do going forward, and specifically how Wharton will help me to get there. So question, when a school asks about short-term and long-term goals, how many years into the future should I talk about for short-term and long-term? So typically short-term is right after school. Well, it's always right after school. And long-term is about 7 to 10 years out. Wharton essay 2, right, this impactful experience. First of all, think about personal stories. I don't want you talking about work here. If you're talking about work, you're probably not submitting a good essay. This is personal. This is outside of work. Pick something that's easy to explain, right? So we wrote that because you have 400 words and you have to talk about what you've done. Then you need to have a couple things that you want to do at Wharton. It's a lot to fit into a short essay. So pick something that's easy to explain in a very, very few number of words. And you need to talk about specific campus contributions. I don't have time today to go into a ton of detail, but what works well here is discussing exact details that you want to do on campus. This is not high level where you say, I want to join the economics club to become a better economist. It's like, okay, what are you doing with the club? How are you actually going to improve things? There's a question about Columbia. So Columbia is coming next. We'll break it down to some extent, although that level of detail is what we provide to clients as we're working with them. So we probably won't get into that exact level of detail that was asked, but we will talk at a high level. So Columbia, essay 1, through your resume and recommendations, we have a clear sense of your professional path to date. Another way to read this is don't tell me everything that you've done so far. They don't want to know that, right? Only a little bit. What are your career goals over 3 to 5 years, and what in your imagination would be your long-term dream job? So here you have the ability to think further into the future. This doesn't have to be the 7-year plan. This could be a 15-year plan, 20-year plan, 30-year plan. I don't know how old you'll live to, but this could be longer, longer term. Be specific here, but as you're dreaming, make sure to stay logical, right? This is not the time to say, I want to be CEO of a top, 5 tech company in the world. Maybe you'll get there, but you won't get any credit applying to schools by writing that. And that's to be clear. I'm sure a lot of you will go on to be huge leaders in the world, but because the school doesn't really know that, dreaming too big doesn't actually help you. And here you can actually mention a little bit about how Columbia will help. That's a quick tip that you might not hear otherwise. It's actually helpful. We've had a ton of success so far at Columbia. I think we've had 13 people get accepted so far, and it's still October. A lot of people are interviewing. So, so far the year's looking pretty good. If you're interested in Columbia and you want help, email me tonight because it's rolling. The sooner you get these apps in, the better. And you really want to get that in as soon as possible. You've missed early decision at this point, but you can still get it in for this year. For those who are planning for a future year, Columbia's early, so we can be writing the essays very early, March, April. Again, the sooner you submit, the better for Columbia. So is the CBS 50 character statement of what we want to do immediately upon graduation, how obvious do we state it? And then a question for my email. Yes, so the email is Scott, SCOTT, at personalmbacoach.com. And you will all get an email from us tomorrow. So maybe even tonight. Can you be specific here? Yeah, so this is the exact role. So this is like, I want to be a consultant focusing on finance, something like that. So stated very obvious, I want to work in product management at a tech company, something like that. Have you helped any clients get to NYU? Yes, tons of folks. So we have, I'll show you the slide at the end, but we have clients in every top school. So any school that you would be looking at, we have folks that go, many folks every year. So we can certainly talk about NYU. We're not talking about NYU today, just because, honestly, my marketing head creates all this content and I just read the slides. So I'm not sure exactly why we pick these schools, except that we only have so much time and, we pick some schools. So in future presentations, we can certainly talk about NYU and some other programs. Apologies that we won't get into that today. So essay number 2, why do you feel Columbia Business School is a good fit for you? Do research, right? Think about a few different things that you want to mention, maybe classes and clubs. Perhaps you can talk about New York a little bit and discuss a little bit about the cultural fit. This is short, 250 words. The only way to screw this up is to write too many things or not enough things. Nobody really writes not enough things, but some people write too many things. They have this laundry list of 12 reasons why you want to go to Columbia, and it becomes too listy. So you really want to be strategic here. Can you email me for Stanford? Yes. So any essays, feel free to send an email. Happy to help with all schools. How would you approach the Kellogg JD MBA essays or breakdown of that program in terms of analysis? So that's something that we won't talk about today. If you want help on dual degrees, we do dual degrees. We have either 1 or 2 clients in Kellogg's JD MBA program now, actually, and it's a small program. So happy to help you with that offline. We don't have slides to discuss that today, so we probably won't be covering that. Apologies. Next, essay 3. Who is a leader you admire and why? This is a new essay, and people have been having fun with this. Half of my clients ask me if they can write their recommender, and I say, great, why not? You're certainly admiring this person enough to ask them to be a recommender, so why not write about them? Pick someone that you want to emulate. Maybe someone has a similar background to you, right? The why should speak to your story to some extent. This is not a random question. This is a specific question that really tries to get at something about you and your background and how you are as a leader today and how you want to be a leader going forward. So Kellogg essays, we are talking about Kellogg, just not the JD MBA portion. Kellogg's purpose is to educate, equip, inspire brave leaders who create lasting value. Provide a recent example where you demonstrated leadership and created value. What challenges did you face and what did you learn? Right, and then they ask, values are what guide you in your life and work. What values are important to you and how have they influenced you? So for this first one, you want to pick something that's significant, kind of obvious, but have something that's really significant, right? This is a big thing that you've done. There's this big value, the story is impactful. At the same time, make sure that it's easy to set up, meaning 450 words go very quickly, especially when you have 4 parts. You have to talk about demonstrating leadership, creating value, challenges, and learning. So 4 parts. It's not an equal division, 450 divided by 4, but you do have to talk about 4 parts. Make sure that you show how you might continue to leverage these learnings going forward. It's not required to do this, but it's important to keep that in mind. As you think about stories, this could be personal or professional, but what you want to do is keep it simple, keep it easy to understand, right? So I told you earlier that you don't want to have 16 different people that you talk to. I think I had a different number. this is the essay where you have to keep that in mind, right? We don't want so many groups of people that you worked with, so much teamwork and leadership and impact that I'm just exhausted reading it, right? You want it to be a very easy essay to read. Let's see, we have some questions. Ooh, lots of questions. Okay. Where can I get a list of all questions which MBA schools are asking for 2019 before I even start with applications? I would like to start writing the essays outside. So it's a good question. I mean, we have that, so you can email me. We have a Google Doc with all the questions. Also on our website, personalmbacoach.com, there's a blog, and we have analysis for many schools' questions, but we have all the questions listed in a document, so you can send an email. On the leader essay topic, how much should be about them and how much should be about you? There's not a perfect balance, so it does depend on the essay and depend on the leader and how much the general public knows about the leader and how much they don't know. So that's a level of detail I probably wouldn't get into today. And then another question, let's see. Would you suggest on this very Kellogg essay 1 for it to be a successful example? Yes, I hope so, right? Because you demonstrated leadership and you created value. So hopefully this is successful. This is not the time to have a failure. Failures are good, but not for this essay. Or a situation where we made progress, grew as a person, but failed in the end. Yeah. Let's have this be a success, ideally. It's not wrong to have it be a failure, but I don't suggest it. Then essay 2, values are what guide you in your life and work. So here, right, we have 3 short bullets. Authenticity. Authenticity is really important. Don't feel the need to come up with these Mother Teresa values that make you look like the best person since sliced bread. Just think about you. Maybe ask a family member what values actually motivate you. You might want to kind of reverse engineer this and think about what things you like to do and why you want to do them or why you do them. And based on that, what values actually kind of drove you. The why is important. It's more important than the values because everyone has values and everyone can come up with the values. You can Google what are the best values to have and you'll come up with them and then you can write them down. So who cares what your values are? What's important is the why, and make sure to get personal here. That's pretty high level on Kellogg essay 2. Okay, so save time for last minute items. In fact, I often advise clients to do the last minute items first. That way they don't become last minute. It's a little trick. Things like short answer questions, they can take time. Don't forget about that. Start the applications today. Make sure that you share, we say share completed essays with recommenders, or at least share the resume. You don't have to share the full essays, but at least the resume. And have someone unfamiliar with your essays do a thorough proofread. We have a proofreading team who does not do any editing for us, and they just go through and make sure to catch errors, as many errors as possible. So if you're not working with a consultant, have someone who doesn't know you do the proofreading. There are always errors. Don't worry if you have errors. We have people at Harvard and Stanford both that made errors in their applications, but they're minor. So we want to catch as many of the major ones as possible. This is an example of some of the schools that our clients have gotten into. Again, our clients have gotten into all of the top schools. So any school that you would be applying to, we have folks in. And last year was over $4.5 million in scholarships. So, quite a lot of money is awarded, many times more than the average. A little bit about how we help. So we help through all the phases of the process from, actually, I'll go through this in a second. Let me introduce myself a little bit more. Half of you came at the end, or rather after I started the presentation. So my name is Scott Edinburgh. Went to MIT for undergrad, studied economics and business at Sloan. Part of their undergrad business program was a TA for a negotiations class. Then went to work at Deloitte in consulting, working for the MBA. 12 years of experience now running Personal MBA Coach, top ranked consultant on a few different sites. What we do with Personal MBA Coach, we do comprehensive, tutoring and admissions consultancy. So if you need help with a test, we have software that you can use to guide through the tutoring sessions. We assign problems, watch you answer the questions, and really help you to create a plan for you. And we have 11 tutors on our team. I'm on the board of the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants, which is a group of 7 board members globally that work pretty closely with AdCom throughout the year. We have a conference every year where we're analyzing applications, determining who should, quote, get accepted. They're all fake applications. We do early planning, so in case any of you are early and not applying yet, we help you to create the best profile that you can between now and when you're ready to apply. And we have 13 former interviewers from many different top schools to help with the interview prep. So this is a little bit of a sort of visual representation of the things that we do. The biggest time commitment is on the essays, right? So essays take most of the time. It's a great time to start for round 2. So if you haven't started, you're considering hiring a consultant, you're not sure, are we evil, are we mean, do we bite? Send a note, have a conversation, no risk, no cost. If you're not interested, that's cool. At least you can get some thoughts. But if you are considering it, let me know, because now is a good time to get started. We don't want to be rushed too much towards the end. I'll stop here for questions. There are a couple different things that you can download. We have 2 guides, MBA analysis guides, both of which are pretty new actually. So one is the M7, so essays for the M7, and one is just beyond the M7. A lot of people apply to M7, but not everybody. So there are a lot of schools beyond the M7, and we started analyzing some of those questions as well. I don't believe you can click on this, but we will send out this presentation afterwards, or you can type this into your web browser and certainly get the page on your own. At this point, we have about 15, 20 minutes or so left. I'm happy to answer any other questions folks have. Otherwise, I can just sort of chat and keep giving advice. So anything else in your mind, feel free to ask away. Saw a hand raise. Let's see. Try how to call on someone. You were called on. You just have to type your question here. Okay, so I have just started studying for the GMAT and plan to take it on December 3rd. Question 1, is this sufficient time to study and give GMAT? I would say it depends on the progress. That's somewhat tight, so it's possible, but usually we like to see a little bit more time with folks. It also depends whether you're getting private tutoring. When we do tutoring, people work a lot more efficiently because we help you to study. Question 2, with limited time, is it okay for me to start with essays after my GMAT? I don't recommend that. I think that's too close. Is it possible? It's definitely possible, but if you're only writing in December, I mean, on average, people are applying to between 5 and 7 schools. So that gives you just a few weeks to do all those essays. I think that's not enough. We actually recommend not doing a whole lot of writing in December. Definitely nothing in the last few weeks to not rush the process. So if I were you, I would do things simultaneously. And if you were to sign up with us, I would strongly recommend that. Otherwise, you'll just end up being rushed towards the end, and you don't really want to feel rushed. Is all the consulting done online? Yeah, it's a great question, and you've had a few questions tonight, so thank you for that. Yes, so we have a virtual model for consulting. We do in-person, meetings depending on where you are, where we are. At some points, during the season, I'm meeting with someone tomorrow actually, but most of it is virtual, and we have clients around the world, so we can certainly help you with that. Most of what we're doing is editing. So once we get into the editing process, we have a team of graduate English professors, and you would have one of them, assigned with me to you, so that I'm working with you directly throughout the process. You have a second editor as well. We have a project planning system that we use to guide through the process with basically folders and deadlines, reminders for everything that you need to do. So it's a very visual process. It's a very easy to follow process, and it's one where you can't get lost or fall behind or forget things. You could ignore all the reminders, but we'll continue to ping you both through automatic and sort of manual reminders to make sure that we move things through the process. Here's a question about recommendations. Yes, so I won't repeat the question, and you'll know why in a second. But let's just say you do not want to be that involved in the recommendations. You can guide your recommenders through the content, meaning discuss high-level points that they can cover and remind them of the things that you've done. You do not want to write any part of your recommendation. Even 5 consecutive words can get you in trouble. People are getting rejected for doing this. I know it happens. I know plenty of people get in, and you'll probably talk to people who say, oh, just write your letter and you'll be fine. Don't do it. I know people are getting acceptances withdrawn. It's not the right thing. You don't want to do it. So if a recommender is asking you to do that, you need to go back to them and tell them that you can't do that. And if they still push, I would suggest getting a new recommender. It's just too risky, and it's not worth the risk. Any tips on Yale SOM essay question? Yes, we love Yale. So for Yale, Yale has what is the biggest commitment you've made, and well, that's it. It's just what is the biggest commitment you've made. It's 500 words. The tip I would have here is to make sure that it's a big commitment. I know it seems like a stupid thing to say, but make sure that it's significant. This does not have to have anything to do with your professional background or anything like that. This is just something real that you've done. You spent a lot of time. You've really focused on it. Be yourself. Be authentic. Don't worry about Yale. Like, I don't care about Yale in this question. Yale is not relevant here. This is just you, and this is the commitment. We've had people do a lot of different things, and if you end up working with us for the applications, we can give you a whole bunch of different examples to show you what types of success we see with this essay. But just be real and be honest, and whatever thing you've been committed to, that's it. It can be playing the drums. Maybe that's the biggest commitment that you've made, and if so, that's an essay. I'm thinking of applying in a year's time. Is it too late to get involved in an extracurricular organization? Will it seem like I'm only starting it for the sake of the application? Absolutely not too late. In fact, we have these early planning packages specifically designed to help folks like you. We're taking a few more folks through early planning this year, so if you're interested, let me know. It's not too late. The biggest thing that we do, through this is to help people think through what extracurriculars they should do. And you have to focus on quality, not quantity, but even more so than quality, you have to focus on story. So that's why story development is important. It's obviously better if you do something for 5 years than 1 year, but no, it's not too late to get something started for next year. Is there any possibility that the school can give you a chance to retake your GMAT? Yes, there is a possibility, but it's not a guarantee. What happens is if a school really likes you, and the only thing that they don't like is the GMAT score, they might put you on a wait list. And if you're on a waiting list, then they might give you some feedback. And the feedback might be, hey, Billy, have you thought about the test? Are you studying for quant? They might give you some signals. Or they might just be very direct and say, hey, you're like 30 points too low. So that would be the chance that you would have to retake it, but you can't count on that. It's possible that the school does not give you that chance and rejects you for one reason or another, and it could be because of a test score. So if you're close, you can apply anyway, but you may or may not have the opportunity to actually show them a higher score. But Columbia allows you to retake the test within 21 days of submitting the application. So that's a little benefit there. Most other schools don't have an official policy like that. Thank you. Yes, no, hey, the questions are great, so keep them coming, absolutely. Another question on Yale. Okay, so I just addressed this. You're all thinking alike. So we talked about that so far. My recommender is ready to brainstorm with me, but not write my LOR, especially for all different schools that I'm planning to apply to. Is it possible to get help with writing LORs? So I don't recommend it. I know it's challenging, and believe me, this was one of the key topics at the GMAT conference. So GMAT invited me to be a speaker this summer, and we had like a couple hundred admissions directors in the room. One of the key topics was recommendations, and bosses asking you to write the recommendations for them. Again, what I say here is you just have to push back, and you just have to ask them to do it. But keep in mind that there are not unique questions for all schools. In fact, thanks to GMAT, who runs the MBA tour, there's now a common rec letter. So many schools ask recommenders to write the exact same questions, and therefore they can just do it once and submit it to a whole bunch of schools. Now, not every school is part of this process, but many are. I think I answered that about profile and GMAT score. If my post-MBA goals have nothing to do with my past, how do I position them so they don't sound far-fetched? Well, they should have something to do with your passion. If not your past, then your passion. Right? If you think about it, I said they need to be logical. So we have people that change industry, function, geography, and language. So the 4 pivots. And if they do, then they have to talk about passion. as long as there's some kind of passion, there's a reason for the goal, then it can seem like it's not far-fetched. The other thing to do is maybe to dial the goal back a little bit. You know, perhaps you have this goal that's very high and you may or may not actually achieve it. You know, dial it back, right? Think through what you want to do beforehand. Let's say like private equity. A lot of people want to go into private equity, and pretty much whenever I see it as a goal, like, except if you've certain experiences beforehand, I just say no. Like, that's not something we can write about. It's a little bit too aggressive. So maybe we discuss doing investment banking first and then moving into private equity, you know, later on to kind of push off the goal. And that goes for entrepreneurship things as well. If you're starting a company, that might be the longer term plan, or it might be the shorter term, but then you really have to have the, you know, the details ironed out. Question, can we get consultancy only for essay writing? You know, the essays are most of the process, so we don't have just essay packages. We work with a select number of applicants each year, and we work pretty much through the comprehensive packages. We do have like a one-time gut check at the end, but that's if you've written the whole applications and you just want one review to make sure to perfect it. But send me a note and let's discuss your situation. So more than happy to hear from you and get a sense for what you're looking for. How long should the LOR be from the recommender? So the schools have limits and they have lengths. They're usually 1,000 words, sometimes 550 words. So anywhere from 550 to 1,000 words is the length for recommendation. Not too bad. Okay, good to know how you felt, but people felt differently. Yeah, absolutely. Everyone has a different perspective here. This is the inside perspective. So I can tell you from having very specific conversations this summer. The sign up buttons don't work for the links. So I think this is because we're in the webinar. Let's see. Yes, because I just clicked through and it worked for me. So we're in the webinar presenting, and it's not an actual link. You're just seeing the image on the screen. So once we send you a link to the deck afterwards, you can sign up yourself. So yeah, apologies for that. We probably should take down the links. But you can go to personalmbacoach.com and you will find all of our downloadables. And these are a couple of them. Let's see. Any other questions? Keep the questions coming. We have a few more minutes. Okay. How long does it take to write a significant essay? It's a really good question. Usually we see applicants spending a few weeks to do an application. Now that varies a little bit because you might write well, you might not write well, but generally a few weeks is doing an application with a consultant. So like if you're working with me, that's a few weeks. If you're doing it on your own, it might take you a little bit longer. What shouldn't you highlight? I believe this is in the recommendations. What shouldn't you highlight in the recommendations? You know, there's not really one specific thing to not highlight. It's more important to focus on the way that you've succeeded and how you've done things that are different from someone else at the firm. I guess if I need to answer this question, I would say really specific technical details are not needed to highlight. Yes, we have specific advice for all schools. Happy to talk about Thunderbird. Send a note, and if you're interested in working together, we can go over that. We don't have at this point we're almost wrapping up, so we don't have specific sort of time or advice to go through those right now, but can definitely help you offline for sure. Are there any important or key points that you would recommend mentioning in the essays if I'm someone who wants an MBA so that I can make a career switch? Well, think about the key things that you want to learn. Think about transferable skills. If you can take 2 words away from this presentation, transferable skills, that's important. That way you can show the reader what you've done, prove to them that you've succeeded, but also tell them what skills are transferable so that you can take that and do the next different thing afterwards. So that's probably the biggest takeaway. Advice for Stanford? Yes, tons of advice for Stanford. that will come separately if we move forward. We're not talking about Stanford today, unfortunately. But Stanford and many other schools we can give advice for. Today was just sort of a brief overview, let's say. Is it okay to get a satisfactory GMAT score a year or more in advance of when you apply, or does it look bad to wait too long? No, not at all. You can get it 5 years ago. I don't care. Get a high score. We have people that have 780 on the GMAT and they took it 4 years and 10 months ago, and I say, let's get the application in before it expires. Doesn't matter when you take the test. Also, confused on retaking. Can't you take the test well before the app to get a score you want to submit? Yes, you can. You can retake the test, and you absolutely should. If you don't have the right score, retake it. GMAT makes it extremely easy to retake. You can cancel sessions, reschedule sessions, take it as many times as you want, up to 5 times in a year. And I think if you don't have the score you need, you're always better off retaking. Some people say, when is too much? When do I want to stop taking the test? Well, there's not really any number here because it depends on the situation. But if you can improve the score, I always want you to take it again. Some people say, oh, don't take it more than like 2 times or 3 times. I don't know where this comes from, because you should take it as many times as you need to get the score you need. Now, if you can take it 3 times instead of 8 times and get the same score, yeah, you're probably better off not taking it 8 times. But say you've already taken it X times and you're meeting us today and now we're doing tutoring to help you to get there, keep going until you get the score, because the higher score makes up for all the additional times versus, obviously not having a higher score. Should the long-term goal be too grandiose or world-changing, or can it be more specific personally? Yeah, don't have it be too grandiose, because you're just projecting. If you want to change the world, go ahead and do it, but don't write about it, because it might be harder to prove that you can actually change the world. I'd rather be a little bit more specific and grounded than grandiose. I usually see grandiose goals and I say, I don't know if that'll work. And I often talk folks into, let's say, rephrasing the goals. How to pick the best recommender? That's a very individual type of question. What we do for clients, we have a whole email that we send where it asks a lot of questions about your recommenders. You have to fill out the answers to these questions. We have this one pager that we create. There are things that we do to get the right recommenders. It's hard to say for sure how to pick the best one, but pick someone who can write specific details about you and who likes you a lot. That's it. That's it. Specifics and someone who likes you. All the other things are important, but not that crucial. It doesn't need to be someone who's very high up or very prestigious. It doesn't need to be someone who even has an MBA. We don't really care about that. Just pick someone who likes you and can write very specific details. All things being equal, some of those things that I just said don't matter actually do matter, but only all things being equal. Really good question. How do the New York City schools view the new executive assessment in terms of who should do it for full-time and what's a good score? More of a different test than the GMAT GRE. I plan to apply. Oh, I think that was the next question. Yeah, so really good question. It's brand new that they're taking this. And, I'm a big fan of the executive assessment. So we were the first company to start offering tutoring for the executive assessment. It's a shorter test. It's an easier test. How do they view it? Well, they view it as less comprehensive. In some ways they have to, right? Because it's not quite as comprehensive, but it does show your ability to succeed. Good scores, I would need to see everything else about you before throwing out a number. I do have numbers that I would throw out, but probably privately, only because if I say a number now for Columbia and then someone gets that number, doesn't get in, or doesn't get in, it gets a lower score, it really depends on the whole situation. Typically though, like we're crossing 150, right? And then maybe we're into like 160 or so in the 160s, low 160s, mid 160s, something like that. So that's like the rough range, but it really depends on you. So if you get 141 on the executive assessment, that's probably not good enough. Although it obviously does depend on everything else. I plan to apply just before the deadline for round 2 for business schools, which is mostly end of first week of January. If I don't get a good score in my first attempt on December 3rd, plan to retake it again mid-January, which schools consider my second score after it got cut off. I'm assuming you say after the deadline. You can assume no, they will not consider it. Some schools will take it, but you can't assume that. Columbia is the only school that sort of officially, unofficially says 21 days post submission, you can actually send them a new score and they will take it. A school like Harvard, they will not take it. You can get an 800 the day after submission, they do not consider it. So certain schools are extremely strict, whether one way or another, and then most of them say that they evaluate when you submit the application. Sometimes they'll look at it, sometimes they won't, but I wouldn't assume that they would look at it. So you really want to have a score before submission. And even a school like Wharton now, they want it 2 weeks before the deadline, so they can have the AWA score, which is actually new this year. They didn't used to do that. Hi, Scott. Can you share a short brief, what kind of question for Stanford Graduate School business? Yeah, so Stanford asked what matters most to you and why, and then they say, why Stanford? I mean, those are the two questions. So that's, pretty high level, though what matters most is a very deep topic that we don't have time to go into today. But those are the two questions. And again, happy to help you offline. I'm applying for PhD business programs. How does the structure for the statement of purpose essays differ from the MBA ones? Well, so the difference for PhD, and this goes for PhD or other specialized master's programs, is that they want to know a little bit more about your whole story. For MBA, it might be more specific, like what are your short-term and long-term goals, and what classes do you want to take to get there? Whereas for other programs, it's really the whole personal story. So, who are you? What are all the things that you've done? What are all the ways that you're going to advance things in the future? How does this program fit into it? It's not night and day different, but it does tend to be a little bit more all-encompassing than a standard MBA essay. Do you have to put more emphasis into the essay in order to be eligible for scholarship, or which way could you get the benefit of scholarship? So scholarships are awarded based on the strength of the essays and the GMAT score. It's really those two metrics. So yes, you need to put a lot of effort into essays if you want scholarships. That's how our clients get so much money. They write really, really good essays and also get high test scores. So that's very important if you want to get some scholarships. Okay, can geographic mobility to United States be one of the reasons for MBA at M7 given the current political climate? It can, but I don't like it as a reason. Your reason should involve the school, studying, your career, not just that you want to go to the US to work. I would instead have, let's say better reasons related to the school itself and what you're getting from the school. Is it far-fetched to use the MBA to pivot from consulting to brand management? No, not at all. We have folks that talk about that, but ideally you're doing something to do with marketing or consumer or product or people or something in your consulting work. But if not, no, brand management's a fine path. And we definitely have clients that go from consulting to brand management. So I think that can work out well. Let's see, maybe a couple more questions. Anything else here? They keep coming. Okay, I answered that one, the executive assessment. Yeah, I guess we were backed up because sometimes people are submitting questions twice. The website. So question about the website. We will look into this afterwards. Yeah, apologies about that. I know if you use it in Chrome, it should work fine. But yeah, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I will look into that. Okay, let's see, a couple more questions. What are good things to ask yourself before the brainstorming, answering what school is good for you? How do your skills view the executive assessment? We talked about that. Scott. Good score, okay, for engineering background, low GPA. So let me see, I'll answer a couple more questions. So if you have a low GPA and high GMAT score, yeah, I mean, those definitely offset each other. So, engineering background and a low or average GMAT score. How will the AdCom perceive it? And your French, oh great, I love the French, so that's good. I mean, they won't perceive it positively if the score is low, right? But there's a range for a reason. So if you see the 80% range, and you're falling somewhere in that range, then you could get in. Even if you're in the 100% range, you could get in. But what you want to do is show them your abilities elsewhere. So if your test score is low, then maybe you do a lot of good analytical, skills, or rather you do a lot of good analytical things at work to showcase your skills. Would it hurt to take the EA if your GPA isn't stellar, but you have 7 to 10 years experience and are pursuing a non-quant post-MBA? No, it doesn't. It definitely doesn't hurt. You can do well on the EA, and I think that would work out well. So this recommender question, that's a little specific, so I'm going to skip over that for now. Let's see. Look at 2 exams. Do schools look at the scores per section for the GMAT? No, they don't. With the exception of Darden and Tuck, those are the only 2 schools that will evaluate the best of both sections. Otherwise, you have to submit 1 complete score. Okay, let's see. Any questions about LORs for PhD? So LORs are different for each program. They're different for programs within, the MBA programs and for PhD and other specialized masters. So you do have to look at the requirements. If there's no requirement, then you can assume 500 to 1,000 words. I would not mention exam anxiety for an optional essay reason why you have a low GMAT score. It's not a good answer. I hear you about anxiety, but it doesn't really work. You can talk about doing other analytical things outside of work. You can talk about other classes that you've taken, ways that you've offset things, but I wouldn't talk about anxiety. I think this was most of the questions. Feel free to type 1 or 2 more. We are caught up now, so if anyone wants to ask 1 or 2 more, feel free. Thank you so much for coming tonight, this morning, depending where you are. These were great questions. Everyone is very engaged, so that's extremely helpful. We will be sending something out to you after this session, once we get the list of emails, which will probably be, let's say, tonight or tomorrow. And if anyone is interested in chatting further, please feel free to reach out. But really appreciate the time, everyone, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you soon at the MBA tour. I'll be touring with them in the US in the winter. And until then, have a great rest of the week.